Hello everyone, before this video starts, I would appreciate if you guys would leave a like and subscribe, since your support means the world to me and allows me to make these types of videos. Now let's get into the video. It's something she's been doing for as long as we have rented this house together. When she is sleeping, normally in her deepest sleep, I've noticed she itches and scratches like there are bugs creeping between the hairs of her skin. Some days she wakes up with freshly scabbed scratch marks where she dug in too deep. Typically, I try and hold her hands before bed just to stop her from scratching, but I tend to get antsy when she falls asleep, and I end up reading for a bit until I can doze off. Lately, it's been like insomnia, maybe due to anticipation of change. Now, we have definitely been coming towards a turning point in our lives, as our lease is ending. We have been sorting out what to sell and give away furniture-wise, because we are moving out west and won't be bringing much with us. I collected everything else I could think of that would be worthwhile with the intention of hitting a few pawn shops to see what I could get in return. I had some baseball cards and a PlayStation I never used. I even listed my TV for a great price online and got rid of it the next day. We planned to drive separately across the country, but we still didn't have that much space in two sedans, as I kept reminding her. I asked her if she had anything unnecessary that would take up too much space in our cars. She would only say she had everything handled and we had plenty of time. But I had been getting anxious over her inaction. I mean, she really seemed stuck in this place. That is one of the reasons I love her, a sentimental nature. She really appreciates what we have, and this place we lived in is a part of that. But this felt different somehow, like she actually could not let go. And this place was feeling hard for even me to leave for some reason, which was stupid. I mean, I wanted to move. I was ready. We were ready, and it was my OCD that propelled me to go through her areas and belongings while she was out for her friend's birthday dinner. At least that's what I told myself. Surely there was a part of me that was investigating. She had been acting strangely. That part of me that suspected something, enough to snoop, grew into my full astonishment when I found it. It was some sort of gem or crystal, the size of a baseball and smooth. I'm no expert in that sort of thing, but anyone could have seen it was uncanny. It was glowing a subtle reddish beam from its very core. Upon inspecting the gem further, I noticed some sort of runic text. It was beyond my abilities to decipher even Spanish, let alone this. But it was then I started to feel I could understand, as if the runes were speaking to me, calls of my name in a long-lost universal language that we all comprehend when heard. It was then that I panicked and dropped the gem to the floor. I dropped down next to it. I gazed upon the glow illuminating towards me. I panicked and pulled myself back towards the wall. I caught my breath and pulled a pillowcase off the bed. I wrapped the gem thoroughly so the gleam of the gem ceased to show through the opaque linen wrap. I staggered my way through the house all the way to the kitchen table and sat the gem atop it. I felt relieved upon setting it down, for it had begun to feel heavy, and so was the sinking feeling that now sat in my chest. I waited there at the table for her to return. I had no clue how I would confront her about this. She tried to call me as she was on her way home, but I couldn't answer. I wasn't ready to face this looming confrontation. She greeted me from a distance, sensing something was off. I bid her closer. That sinking feeling was dragging me deeper into the depths of what was covered in the pillowcase. I decidedly uncovered the gem because I came up with nothing to say. "What are you doing with that?" she had asked. I posed the retort that I ought to be asking her the same question. "That's mine, and you shouldn't have gone through my stuff," she had said. But I became flustered and pointed out that she had been concerning me with her recent behavior. She seemed aloof and was scratching worse than ever. And this gem, this object felt wrong, like it wasn't supposed to be here. I told her I needed to know where it came from, and then she made me feel like an asshole. She explained that it had been a family heirloom passed down for generations, from mother to daughter. It was a precious item for her, and she had been worried I was going to try and convince her to sell it. I wanted to believe her then, but something just felt off. What about the glow of the gem and the runic text? She looked puzzled at this assertion. She referenced the gem itself, which now, to my disbelief, did not shine in the slightest. Furthermore, I failed to locate the runes I had seen before. Had I been beside myself? Was I hallucinating something this vividly? She calmed me as only she could. She rubbed my shoulders and played with my hair. I believed her when she said that everything was okay. She took the gem, which in her hands looked resiliently inert. For just a moment, I was suspicious that the gem was hiding its true self from us. But she took my hand and led me to bed, and I followed as one does. It was when she started scratching that night that the suspicion came back. I held her hands for a moment to stop her from digging into her skin. This time, her temperature had seemed to rise and her skin felt clammy. Her arms struggled as she attempted to scratch herself. This fit was the worst I'd seen. I knew then what I had to do. I waited until she was in the shower the following morning. I went back to her possessions where she kept the gem. The gem called to me as it did before. Its illumination felt like a familiar friend's embrace. The euphoria felt like her, a calming yet intense sense of belonging. But then it cut off, and everything I had been feeling was taken away. And I felt fierce annoyance, and it was consuming. Thoughts of paranoia followed, and any suspicions I had for the gem were gone. My eyes had turned to her. That night I waited for her to sleep, and surely she began scratching, even more violently than before. And in that moment I felt she deserved it. I went to the gem and basked in its call. The gem told me lies I perceived to be truths, and whispered ideas I had never thought of before. I felt frightened, but the gem reassured me. The gem wanted her for itself. She had found the gem here in the basement, and she had lied about it because she wanted to be with the gem too. As long as the gem could have her, I could have the gem forever. But this promise reminded me of a promise I had thought of making before. A promise of forever. A promise to her. I turned to her. She was clawing her skin. She was drawing blood in several areas. I felt the weight of every step as I went towards her, as if I were dragging chains coupling bowling balls. The gem called me back, but I trudged forward. I had to get to her by any means necessary. The rays of the gem's light brightened beyond vision. I blindly went onward. I instinctively outstretched my grasp, reaching for her. When I made contact with her, she was boiling over the pot with a fever, drenched in her sweat-dampened t-shirt and shorts. I had long since closed my eyes, but clenched them more tightly as I held her with all my strength. She shook rebelliously, attempting to scrape herself wherever she could reach. The gem amplified its call. A cackling resounded in the room, swirling with energy. I felt the heaviness leave my body and lightness took over as if my bones hollowed and I'd achieved some form of buoyancy. My firm grasp around her felt strained, and she began to slip free. She scratched herself good and plenty in short bursts, blood ruining her nails. The gem hollered and heckled. I held on to her for all I could, and it felt as though hours upon hours passed before her heart rate slowed and her breathing steadied. The gem's volume faded and the glow subsided. I panted still as I held her late into the morning. She woke with a start that she had overslept, but I reminded her it was the weekend. I told her to get ready for brunch and to take her good time like she likes, because I had an errand to run. Again, I waited for her to get in the shower. Engrossed as I was from the day before, I threw on a hat and once again pulled a pillowcase from the bed. I sensed the gem had less power, perhaps, during this time of the day. Maybe its light could not outshine the glisten of the sun. It faintly called to me, a pinch of remorse in its tone. I rapped it decisively. This was over. But it wasn't over. I brought the wrapped gem to my car and started up the engine. I noticed that the gem's call was slightly louder in the confined space of the vehicle. I rolled down the windows to let in some air. My plan was to drive to the nearest river where the county meets the city and chuck the gem to the very bottom. It couldn't bother us down there, I reassured myself. I calmed down and actually started to block out the gem's call. It tried to grow louder, but I held fast. I tried to remember her. I needed to picture her, but it distracted me just enough to miss my exit on the highway to the inlet of the river. I cursed, knowing I would have to progress forward through the toll road and into the tunnel. Traffic clogged up by the toll booth, despite the electronic transponder payment lanes. I pulled through my lane at a steady speed and accelerated to pick up to speed at the tunnel, when just then the truck in front of me slammed their brakes. I jerked the car to a stop just in time and just centimeters from the truck's tow hitch. The truck sped off as though not to be bothered by the event, and I proceeded onward. Once inside the tunnel, I began to have an uncomfortable feeling that the gem found something to be humorous. Could it be the truck I had almost hit? Was the gem somehow involved? I thought back to her scratching and decided the gem could have had some involvement. It was at this time that the gem started outright chuckling. I sped out of the tunnel and found myself unable to slow down as the gem burst out in a maniacal laughter. My foot felt like a bag of bricks pressed down on the gas. It was impossible to lift, as if glued to the pedal. I steered off to the side to avoid a collision. Drivers honked as I blew past them on the shoulder. The wind whipped my face through the open windows, which now made the chaotic chortling slice thin slashes in my face. The sound had left blood dripping from my cheeks. I looked off over the side guardrail where the river could be seen in the distance. If I couldn't stop the car, I could make it go where I wanted. I ripped the steering wheel over as hard as I could and angled into the guardrail at full speed. The car flipped on impact and spiraled over the rail, landing upside down in the grass along the highway. I dangled a moment before coming around and unclipping my seatbelt. I dropped onto my neck and shoulders, crawled out of the open window. I coughed and my eyes stung from tears I was apparently crying. I rushed around to the passenger side and saw the gem unwrapped. I grabbed it with little thought and made to chuck it in the river for good riddance. I cradled my arm back to catapult the gem and launched. In a swift motion, my body followed my fist holding the gem to the ground, for I did not let go. I yelled out and cursed the gem again. I madly stomped to the edge of the river and plopped in. I had to tread water here. I took a massive breath and dove beneath the surface. I swam downward, intending to leave the gem at the bottom. But when I reached the sandy surface and placed the gem, I could not let go. Bubbles blew out of my nostrils and mouth as I lost my breath. I firmly placed my feet on the ground and pushed with all my might to launch upward. I ended up flailing in the water. The gem was pulling me down, laughing menacingly through the pressure of the water. It was here I blacked out into darkness. I remember spitting up water on the grass next to the river. I looked around for my apparent savior and saw none. Then I remembered the gem. I searched the immediate area and there was no sign of it. I looked out at the river, wondering if I could have been successful in the dispatching of the gem. Did I really do it? Then the hair on my neck stood and I felt a slight itch. The call of the gem quietly beckoned me. I looked over my palms and shimmering across my skin was a familiar runic text. The itch grew on the back of my neck. I slapped it as one should. Just then reality set in, and from a distance a police officer called across the side bank of the river. A team of paramedics and other officers soon followed, and beyond them I noticed apparent witnesses. I spent the night in the hospital and will get off fairly easily with my clean driving record and a good lawyer. No one had been hurt, and besides a guardrail, only my property has been damaged. Community service and weekly checks in with a therapist, and I might get my license back one day. Or maybe I wouldn't have to worry about that. For now, everyone accepted I had passed out at the wheel due to lack of sleep. I told them in my disorientation I stumbled off and fell into the river. Terrifying, but with the lack of casualties, not much of a police priority or media buzz. But it was all fine as long as I could get back to her, and the next day I did. But things have changed. She was horrified upon my return, cradling herself on the floor. My first thought was the gem was still with her, like it was still with me. But her horrified state simply came from the current date. The last day she remembered was the day we moved into the house. The day she had apparently found the gem, I presumed. She'd spent the day I'd been gone sobbing and figured she was seriously ill, perhaps dying. I calmed her and assured her we'd go to the doctor, that she would be fine. She asked for space, so I grabbed the couch. And now here I am collecting my thoughts, writing these events down, so maybe she can understand what really happened to her. As for me, I now feel the itch. It crawls across my skin in the worst of moments, and especially now at night. I've been applying lotion and drinking water, but this seems like the kind of itch that must be scratched. And so here I sit scratching, hoping she will believe me, while the runes shimmer across my palms. Maybe only I can see them. Maybe the call was always meant for me, because now it serenades me as I fuss over an itch that's been hard to scratch. Thank you for watching the video fully. Please hit the like and subscribe button, since I could not make these videos without your support, and it means the world to me.